Psalm 54, for the choir director, on stringed instruments. A maskil of David when the Ziphites came and said to Saul, "Is not David hiding himself among us? Save me, O God, by thy name, and vindicate me by thy power. Hear my prayer, O God, give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen against me, and violent men have sought my life. They have not set God before them." Selah. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the sustainer of my soul. He will recompense the evil to my foes, destroy them in thy faithfulness. Willingly I will sacrifice to thee. I will give thanks to thy name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from all trouble, and my eye has looked with satisfaction on my enemies. The background story to this is actually really important to what David's writing here, and you find a lot of psalms that David's responding to something that happened in his life, something very specific. And on this psalm is actually referencing two separate occasions that happened fairly close to each other in time in 1 Samuel 23 and 26. And in 1 Samuel 23, David was told that the Philistines were going against a town called Keilah and plundering the threshing floors. And that was a really important thing because people were getting their crops, and Philistines were like, "Hey, it's a freebie, we'll take it." So David inquires of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines or not?" Well, all this time, David is a man on the run. King Saul wants to kill him. He's hiding out in the wilderness. He's got a band of merry men with him. He's just basically fighting for his life. This happens right after Doeg the Edomite kills off the priests because they help David out. David runs off and he's hiding. And so he asks the Lord, "Do I need to go attack the Philistines?" And God says, Go attack the Philistines and deliver them. But his men were afraid. We're afraid here in Judah, wherever they were at. We're afraid. How much more if we go to Keilah and attack the Philistines? They were just unsure. The men were afraid. David wanted to know what he needed to do, but the men who were with him, they were also afraid because they knew, Saul's after them too. So David inquired of the Lord once more. And God told him, "Go down there to this place. I'll give the Philistines in his hand." And so he goes off and fights against the Philistines, and they have a great slaughter, and he carries away all sorts of goods. And he delivers the inhabitants of that town, which is a good thing. So it came about at that point that Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, the last remaining priest that was not slain, comes to David with the ephod and the priestly garments. And it was someone told Saul, "If you want to find David, he's in Keilah." So, of course, Saul's natural response is, "Well, let me go kill him." But Saul summoned all the people to war. He goes down to besiege the place. And he knew that Saul was plotting evil against him. So he asked the priest to bring the ephod. And he asked God, he says, "O Lord, God of Israel, your servant has heard for certain that Saul is seeking to come to Keilah to destroy the city on my account. Will the men of Keilah surrender me into his hand? And will Saul come down as your servant has heard?" And he asks the Lord, what's going to happen? And God tells him, well, he's going to come down. So he went to a place to deliver it, but the people who he delivered were going to surrender him into the hand of somebody who wanted to kill him. It's really kind of a difficult situation. Probably got to thinking, should I have come down here at all? If these people are going to show me that gratitude this way. And so he asks God again, "Will the men of Keilah surrender me and my men into the hand of Saul?" And God says they will. So he gets up and leaves, and he wanders into the strongholds in the area of Ziph. Now, I don't have a map, so I'll have to look at exactly where that is. But I think he goes south and toward the Arabah. And Saul sought him every day, couldn't find him. Well, David was increasingly more aware that Saul was coming after him. And Jonathan, Saul's son, comes out to meet him. And he says, "Look, I'm on your side. I want to encourage you. Don't be afraid, because the hand of Saul, my father, will not find you. And you will be the next king over Israel." Jonathan knew that God had chosen David to be the next king. The man who would be king after Saul, if David was not king, would be Jonathan. But Jonathan knew that God had chosen David to do that. So the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Hey, David is down here hiding among us." And David, that's, again, same kind of thing that happened with him at Keilah, and so Saul tells the Ziphites, "Hey, may you be blessed of the Lord. You've had compassion on me. Take a look, see where he's at. Tell me where he's at, so I can go and find him. He's very cunning." So they arose and went to Ziph before Saul, basically like kind of a lookout. They're spying out David. And his men, David and his men, were in the wilderness of Maon, which is really close to where Nabal and Abigail were. And so Nabal and Abigail, he's the guy that was foolish, and Abigail becomes David's wife later because of Abigail's problem, just dealing with David. So David's hiding. He's in the wilderness, and while they're out there in the wilderness, Saul's told he's out here by this rock. Saul goes on one side of the rock, this big mountain, and David and his men are passing by on the other. So they pass by each other, but there's a big rock between them, so they can't see one another. And God delivers him time and again out of his hand, and they call the place the Rock of Escape. And then David goes to En-Gedi. He spares Saul's life in a cave. He goes down. Samuel dies. A lot of different things happen, and then David's in the wilderness again with Nabal, and he's basically providing protection. And in that process, Nabal dies, and David gains another wife. Well, about that time, he's back again with the Ziphites, and the Ziphites again go to Saul and say, "David's back. Do you want him? We can show you where he's at." And so Saul goes down with 3,000 chosen men to search for David, and he camps before this hill in Jeshimon, and David's seeing Saul coming after him in the wilderness. And David again spares his life while Saul is asleep in the tent. He goes into the tent and he pulls out the spear and a jug of water from beside Saul's head, and they went away. Nobody knew that he'd even been there. He could have killed him. And then in the morning, he calls out to Abner, who is he doesn't even wait till morning. David crosses over to the other side, stood on top of a mountain with a large area of distance between him. And he calls out, "Will you not answer, Abner?" He's the guy who's supposed to be taking care of protection for Saul. And he's like, "Look, I came into the camp and took this, and you didn't even protect your king. See, I'm trying to be righteous." Well, David all the time is trying to do the right thing by Saul, and Saul is trying to kill him. And so he says, "Save me, O God, by thy name, and vindicate me by thy power." David was trying to do the right thing by the man who was trying to kill him. Saul was not trying to do the right thing. Saul was just trying to get rid of his the person who would come after him. He wanted David dead. He wanted Jonathan on the throne after him. He wanted to be king as long as possible. But he was a wicked man. And there were other wicked men. He says, "Give ear to my prayer, O God. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen against me. Violent men have sought my life." It was the strangers, these people in Keilah, these people in Ziph, who were telling Saul, "He's here. Why don't you come get him?" David was providing protection for some of these people. He wasn't harming anybody. He wasn't trying to go after Saul and steal his kingdom. He was just patiently waiting on the Lord to bring that about in God's own time. And he's saying, "God, you've seen what I'm doing and how I'm living. Vindicate me by your power." These violent men, these strangers have sought my life. They've not set God before them. That's the difference. David was trying to seek the Lord. Saul was not. The Ziphites were not. The people in Keilah were not. And David says, "Behold, the God is my helper." And he literally was David's helper, because David was in danger every single day that somebody would have found out where he was, and Saul could have taken all of his army. And even with them going on one side of the rock and David on the other, God protected them. God put them in the right place at the right time and provided cover for them. "The Lord is the sustainer of my soul. He will recompense the evil to my foes. Destroy them in thy faithfulness." David's praying that the Lord will take care of his enemies. David's not willing to lay a hand against Saul because Saul is the king, the Lord's anointed. Most of us would probably try to kill Saul. But David trusted that the Lord knew the right time. And it's hard for us to wait. But David was fine with waiting as long as he knew God was taking care of what needed to be taken care of. He says, "Willingly will I sacrifice to thee. I will give thanks to thy name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from all trouble." and my eyes looked on with satisfaction on my enemies. You can see David on the other side of that hill after he pulls the spear and jug of water up from King Saul's head, and he's looking down on his enemies and saying, God will take care of them. I don't have to worry about this. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to show them over and over again that I'm trying to do the right thing, because God will vindicate me. God will take care of my enemies. God will deal with them. He'll destroy them in his faithfulness. He'll recompense the evil to his foes. But I'm going to do the right thing. And he's trusting in God's vindication. I think we could probably learn a little bit from that. There's always going to be somebody who's against us, somebody who says something. I mean, it's just life, right? It might even be doubts in our own heart. It might be things that we think about. But if we're doing the right thing and we're honoring the Lord, then we can say, God, you see what's going on, Lord. Vindicate me. Just provide, take care of my enemies, destroy the enemies. The enemy might be a person. The enemy might be people who are against you, but the enemy might be your own thoughts. It might be the devil who's trying to convince you that you've messed up, and all of these things that go on in our heart. But if we're walking with the Lord and trusting him, he can provide. He can help. He can sustain our soul. He can deliver us from all trouble. David went through a lot of trouble between 1 Samuel 23 and 1 Samuel 26. It's not just a day. There was some time that passed through there. It could have been upwards of a year or more. Saul was day after day trying to fight David. David was day after day trusting in the Lord to rescue him, and God did rescue him. So